Hello and welcome. I sort of renamed this topic to tune in and turn on, but today we're going to be discussing the turn on is the way in vital force energy. My name is Sarah Shepard. I teach energetic anatomy. This is my dear friend Chris. We're about to jump into a topic that really supports something we're quite passionate about teaching people, and that is how to master their vital force energy and how to work with it in an empowered way. So if you want to know more about that, just check out the show notes. They'll direct you to where you can find out more information. And the invitation is get curious, ask questions. We love to meet people and we love to hear about whatever it is that you're seeking some guidance and support on, because that's what we do. So to start with, shall we just discuss the vital force energy and really what it is, Chris? Maybe I'll hand that over to you because I feel like this is something that you've offered me as a new perspective of looking at this and something that has been transformative in my own erotic awakening experience. And that was never the intention, but when I really started to take responsibility for it, it offered me so much more freedom and energetic mastery in my life. And that has all kinds of beautiful implications, which we'll get into. But just to start, what is it? What are we talking about here?
Mm. Hi everyone. Thanks, Sarah. Um, yes, turn on unique vital life force. So life force for me is the thing that's just the juiciness of life. It's the doesn't mean everything's always pleasant. It means there's a kind of deep aliveness and a kind of a warmth and fire in our being that is there and that propels us so that there's inherent generativity to our being rather than this idea that, oh, I'm in a creative mood or I'm not creative, or those people are the creatives who have whatever jobs and then the other people are not creative or generative, or these constant ways that people are always kind of defining a group as such, or I am or I'm not. And instead, it becomes a zone of, as you said, curiosity, that we can actually live in a place where there's this kind of emanating, incandescent, liquid kind of feel to life. Even when things are challenging or mundane, or as well as when they get spicy or interesting or intense or restful, we start to just feel this deep kind of yes and this deep, I consider kind of like emanating, like a fire that has a kind of ardor about it. And as you said, that has all kinds of other implications in terms of physical implications and health and erotic energy and relational potentials and creativity of the mind and emotional flow and even spiritual potentials, as we'll get into.
Yeah. And also the value of the self-responsibility of it. It's like if I'm feeling this and I'm experiencing consciousness around this, and it's an open channel, sometimes it's not an open channel. So we'll just maybe name that part as like sometimes there's numbness and there can be an experience of I don't feel my desire body or I don't feel this energetic awareness. So just asking yourself that question of like, do you feel your vital life force energy or do you feel flat? Or you feel that something you can look for in people's faces is they will have an aliveness to their face. They will have a brightness to their eyes. They will have an energetic posture that expresses in a way that's lit up. So being able to read what's there and what's not there can be a really helpful part to start. And if it's not there and it's numb, first of all, just to understand that this is something that is a self-authored experience. You get to write the story only when you pick up the pen and start to write the story. So that was not something that was taught to me as a young girl. In fact, that was taught to me to be something that somebody else was responsible for. So this first part is really that as it moves through our body, it's an individual experience. My individual life force energy experience is unique to me, and yours will be unique to you. And when I take responsibility for that, I can start to understand that I can work with it. So when the turn on is owned intentionally, intimacy becomes safer and more honest between two people. Um, yeah, anything you want to share about that? And then I was thinking we could talk about like sort of the deeper layers of personal empowerment and self-responsibility along those lines.
Yeah. The um the intimacy piece there, the safety in this way creates the possibility for deeper intimacy. First means to ourselves for an intrapersonal, whether someone's, as people say, in a relationship, but that's funny to me because there's not people who are in and out of relationships. We're all inherently relational beings of one kind or another. But what people would tend to call single or in a committed relationship or a couple or whatever, um, this applies first and foremost to ourselves. That is coming back into the nature of this, as we're calling it, turn on or deeper arousal in existing, in being, is first and foremost, like you said, a unique expression of a kind of universal life force. And so we become more intimate first and foremost to ourselves. And then that creates intimacy with life and as life in a collective sense, but also specifically for those who are looking for and or are in various kinds of partnerships or relationships in that sense. It creates possibility for intimacy with other as well. And without that base, without that foundation, and really knowing it in our being, not having it as a conceptual thing is nice as a starting point. But we're talking here about really deep embodied knowing, then no wonder people, when we look out in the world of like, it's just so chaotic and dissonant, and all the stuff about sex is bad, or then it's used to sell things, and Eros is only conflated to sex, and people can't hear the word Eros or erotic without thinking it has to be sexual, which is only one expression of it. So there's just confusion everywhere because people are not in touch with their own sovereign life force. And then that's where clarity comes from.
It really is. Yeah, it really is where clarity comes from. And yet sometimes it can be in the disparate experience of it, or when it's kind of fractured and moving in multiple directions, it can feel so confusing, you know? It's like this like combination of magnetism and polarity, when magnetism and polarity is like push-pull simultaneously. And then that feels, you know, you can ask yourself, does that feel like a familiar experience? Is there like a deep longing to understand? And then if you have a deep longing to understand, then there's a space where there is a misunderstanding. And so I did write this out as like turn on equals personal empowerment plus responsibility. So no one else is responsible for regulating, activating, or suppressing our life force. This is a personal agency where when we shift, in particular in the realm of intimacy, from it moving from a demand or an expectation to a choice, then you can immediately experience like the level of um, empowerment that's connected to that, right? It's not, I'm not here because somebody's making me do anything. That's that I'm under the victim, perpetrator, savior. I'm under sort of this sense of personal autonomy. And this is another important part that's like goes with this is that this moves us from a place of acting with the energetic experience within us in a performative way to a presenced way. And so, myself and many of the people, women in particular, that I've worked with over the years, have been misunderstanding the nature of the unconscious performative intimate experience or the unconscious performative eros and how much that has been conditioned into us from a young age. And so when we shift into this experience of presence, which almost every woman says she's longing for, I'm longing for an experience of presence from a partner. And it's like this, well, then what is that for you? What is the presence within yourself? And yeah, just that element of like, it really is just turning towards it is what I found and creating a space for it to be, it's here, it's in me. Where is it? And then right, it almost always like shows up right away as soon as we take responsibility for it.
Yeah. Can I add something there?
Please.
Thank you for what you just shared. I really appreciate it. Um, and that is that when we're talking here about turn on or vital life force, especially a phrase like turn on, people may have their sort of conditioned assumptions or their histories, or they go, oh, I know what that means. But well, the way we're speaking of it here is actually quite distinct often, I think, than most people's experiences. It's either something that's on or off. And we're saying it's more like a fader switch here that you have choice to modulate. And that is turn on in this way, as we're talking about, that's about mastering vital life force, it will feel more smooth. It will feel more continuous, not so many breaks and fractures, as you were saying. It will feel more like sine curvy rather than stock market looking, where it's all spiky. And so, in the process of this way, it's learning to smooth out, which is a consequence of containment. So that you tend to have either repression and avoidance, as you were saying, numbness, or we're out over our skis. You know, that it's like the arousal has me or the turn on has me. And that's usually people's experience. Like, oh, I'm horny and now I just need to go do something to make it go away or have some temporary pleasure. And hopefully that'll kind of uh, settle out. And instead, we're talking about like being able to stoke the fire in a very gentle way that slowly builds this kind of deeper emanating warmth and burn in life. And that's where, if we have that marker, if we're able to say, yes, it's unique in every person's case, but there are some common guideposts or there are some common factors we're looking for as clues. Now we have a path. So turn on is the way, or is at least a deep way, because now, in order to get to that place, as you were saying, we have to deal with childhood stuff. We have to deal with family and social scripting, gender scripting, a huge amount of conditioning and scripting that it doesn't just live out there. It lives in our bones, it lives in our bodies, it lives in our nervous system. So to be able to start to repattern ourselves to know this experience of a deep, safe, really warm, evocative, kind of enriching, fluid, empowered, and yet responsible burn in life and heat is very, very different. And we'll start to notice times where we all have the old patterning and conditioning, and it's just kind of unwinding it from either kind of going out or looking to numb out or just looking to kind of, exploit it or agitate it and then try to like just, oh, it's too much. And now I need to, you know, make it go away.
So what Chris was just saying there is actually really important. And my invitation is, you know, ask yourself, is that your orientation at times? I know all of this. I know all of this information. And when my body is really in an unconscious pattern or there's a big energetic um, hijack experience, you know, some of the experience of hormones can be really spiky or all the way shut down and then come all the way back on really quickly. And that story that can be generated in the mind can, you know, it can really be this like, ugh, is I like the way you said it, kind of over your skis kind of part where you're enjoying yourself and then all of a sudden you're going too fast or you feel like the pitch changed really, really quickly. And so learning how to calibrate to that is a big part of this process. Um, it also conversely can't be forced. So it's this really beautiful, you know, slow warming journey of coming to it. If it's off altogether and you're in a space of numbness or you don't um, have access to it consciously in some way, then that connection of it being on and flowing or on or off and like building a bridge between the two is really what a lot of this work is. And so maybe I'll just speak a little bit about, you know, these elements of like, it's not something that you activate with your willpower. And you know, to be able to reach this like smooth, luminous state requires transformation, presence, not pushing. Um, So there's a certain amount of trust involved that might not be there initially, but it does start to gradually come as you really come back into trusting yourself. So the trust in the experience is coming back to trusting your own experience. And sometimes that support comes in the form of like nervous system regulation and learning how to move out of a chronic survival state or to recognize when we're in a chronic survival state. I would say that's actually the more important part is just to notice when we're in a survival state or that we're having an experience relative to safety or the absence of safety is something that we're just bringing our awareness to. Do I feel safe? Do I feel like I'm a safe container for this energy to be moving? And if we don't, it's beautiful. That's the first step is just to be in the place that you are, just to be in the place of the one that's hosting that energy. Um, Ultimately, it does lead to emotional capacity building. So, being able to hold space for your own emotional capacity, as well as if there is another person involved in this and you're simply just attuning to one another, can you be in your lane, so to speak? Can you be in your own energetic capacity and also feel that they're having a unique emotional experience and that that is their unique emotional experience? Or does it make you uncomfortable, as it very much does as interdependent beings? You know, another person's big emotional experience, it's normal for that to make us feel somehow um, however we feel, but it's a sensitivity to their feelings and our feelings. And developing and generating a container that can pendulate and be aware of self and stay within my lane, as well as, you know, attune empathically to another person's experience without making it my responsibility is a big part of the growth within this. And this really, you know, I think probably underspoken to part of our cultural conditioning, which is that as we gradually like slow down into the spaciousness of what it takes to host like a vessel that's really in a good level of containment for this energy to be moving slowly means you're unlearning a lot of cultural messages around rest is lazy, pleasure is dangerous, feeling is deeply unsafe, that control equals strength. You know, relational safety with others is feeling that we are allowed to exist without performing, without pleasing, or without constantly protecting ourselves or another in an experience. There is a wildness that is inherent. We are wild beings, even though we love to say that we are not. We are human animals. And so some of the elements of our human animal coming alive can have this animalistic expressions. And if that's not something that you're comfortable with, that's all right. But it is a part of this vital force energy coming alive. You know, there can be elements of big emotions that come through, and that is actually something to celebrate as opposed to something to contour or control. For many women, we hear this expression. We'll go deeper into this as this video series goes on, but it's this experience for many women where they're like, I don't want to be too much, or I feel like I'm too much. And for many men, the kind of parallel or the mirror to that is I feel like I'm not enough, or I feel like I'm not doing enough, or I feel like I'm not protecting enough. And so we have this like, you know, if it is a heteronormative or if you have a like a yang yin disposition that's showing up, there can be co-triggering that's going on. So being able to like allow yourself to recognize like this is a slow journey. This isn't a like a this is not a like get to a destination. And again, ask yourself, like, do you have a destination in mind when you're having this experience of being turned on? I know for myself, for a very long time, I unconsciously was like, yes, there's a destination and it looks like blank, right? So just like being able to look at this from that space. Um, I want to talk a little bit about like the reparative nature of the healing, not from the fixing trauma. But is there anything that you want to reflect on before we move forward on that?
No, I think that was beautiful what you said, and I was thinking of going to the next to that part too. So sounds like a good
Yeah.
time to go there.
Yeah. Maybe I'll just lead with this part where it's like, this is not about fixing trauma. You know, this is like we gotta want to say from the beginning, like it's so juicy in our modern culture, this like healing and trauma repair, and like it's almost like a cultural trope right now. It's like so much of life is about this. And so we're actually saying this is not about that. But healing happens, in my experience, indirectly when there's safety and there's agency. the body is a self-healing mechanism. And so as soon as there's safety and agency, healing sort of just is like the weather that moves through, as opposed to it being like the weather that we're chasing. Um, I want to go into this a little bit more. As I would love to hear your like lean in on that one a bit.
For me, I think a key point is starting to have, even if it's in small amounts, nevertheless meaningful and potentially very liberatory and transformative experiences of when we're saying things like this kind of turn on is smooth and it's warm and it's like the coals are really, the embers are hot, all these kind of metaphors and just attempts to point at something. It's pointing at something that's actually quite real in people's experience in their own unique way. And it's that experience that really sends the green light, that sends the signal for the rest of the process. Because at that point, now somebody knows. Even if we forget and we need to remember, some part of us doesn't forget. Once it's really had the experience, like, oh, this feels right. This feels home. This feels fundamentally wholesome and good, which is a beautiful and important thing. And then it's going to bring forward in time, it's going to bring forward all the reactive stuff that's going to go, why didn't anybody tell me that? And I'm super angry and pissed off. And what's wrong with the world that we don't treat each other this way? And then the heartbreak and all the tears of, oh my God, like think of all the lost time and think of how much unnecessary suffering we've gone through or doing to each other still. Fear of like, oh my God, people won't get me. This could wreck things. This could change everything and whatever. And on and on and on. Shame. If you're gonna come to contact your vital life force and learn to want to center your being in and live in it, you're gonna meet the character called shame along the way. Like, is the bouncer at the door. And there's the guardian at the threshold or whatever term you want. Like, shame is gonna be right there. And so all these emotions will arise and various sensations. And if people have histories, sadly, of giving away their vital life force in an erotic or a sexual way, or having it exploited or manipulated or abused, there can be a lot of history there. So the healing and energies of dysregulation and experiences that are incomplete come up. But like we said, it's not the focus because the focus is, can we stay in this fundamental wholesomeness that is our connection to life, that is our unique expression to life? And the responsibility comes with the like, okay, as a consequence of that, this other stuff is going to want to move through. And why does it want to move through? So there's more space for the wholesomeness and the deep kind of warmth here to fill and kind of like honey, kind of moving down from the top of your head, kind of feeling and like immersing and, kind of moving through a being. It will, in the process of that, want to move through and push out the other stuff that's there that is older history that's not about this way of living. And there'll be emotion about that, and there'll be sensation about that, and there'll be memory about that. And old behavioral patterns of protection, and those get to be faced, but they're then faced from the place where we have resource because now we're connected to what we know is good and right in this kind of current of life. And now we can kind of start to feel like maybe we can be bigger than even the grief. And if not, if there's a moment that's like, okay, then I need to step back, build up some more of a sense of capacity here, titrate, modulate that grief down to a more bite-sized chunk so that we can get the experience of, oh, I actually do have the capacity to complete my experience and be way more present and radically alive. That's again, turn on is the way, right? So it's like one topic, but then that topic brings kind of everything else in as a consequence of it.
Yeah. Thanks for naming that part, because we talk a lot about soil when we talk about elements of like excuse me, the health of the body. And another way of kind of looking at an energetic channel is like you would look at a channel of water. And so say you've got like a hose or some plumbing in your yard, and some dirt gets into it, or a dead animal gets into it, or something gets into it, and you flush it out, it starts to move again. And you wouldn't look at that, dead mouse or a piece of, a hairball or something like that and be like, I am a hairball, I am a dead mouse. But like sometimes when it's the energetic expression that's moving through, it's like, I am shame, or I am rage, or, it's like there's you and you're having an experience of it moving. That's the chemistry. And when you can observe that, that's a really positive thing. It was in there, it's now moving out of you, but it isn't you like this. It's so inviting to merge with it. It can be such an interesting space to kind of accidentally get confused about this. But so this is why this work is like so helpful to understand. When it's like you start to get the lay of the land in your energetic anatomy, then you start to have control and agency, and it really becomes a more seamlessly pain um, conscious or process, where you can see it moving as opposed to it being like it's stuck, and I don't know what to do with it. It's stuck within me is like often I think how I used to orient to it anyway. So this place, I just want to underscore this thing again, which is like healing happens indirectly when safety and agency are restored. So it's an expression. We are self-healing mechanisms. It just occurs as a result of there being safety, number one, safe containment and agency. These are cardinal points that we'll address over and over and over again, especially throughout this series, but they're really, really important. Um, the body reorganizes itself naturally when vital life force is welcomed rather than controlled. So sometimes that's like, oh my gosh, I'm experiencing a really big energy, and there can be conditioning to say no to it or to collapse around it. A lot of the work I do with women can be this like space that we have a pattern potentially where our receiving cup is like really, really, really tiny. And so if it hits sort of like that's more pleasure than I've ever been able to experience before, it can hit these elements of what I like to use like this like energetic wounding that might be there. So that's good. That's good to be like, oh yeah, there's a lot of pressure in this part of the channel because it's so narrow. Not because I'm bad or wrong or broken, but just like if we just got objective and looked at it, it's like that part of the channel is really narrow, and you're not at fault for that. It's not the hose's fault. We don't say you're a bad hose for being narrow in this part, but we sometimes do this with ourselves energetically as we merged with these elements. And working with the body in this way can be way less re-traumatizing and more organically integrating. It's like a really sweet way to create a space for organic integration. I'm going to briefly speak about a couple of things that happen with the wholeness. That element of the wholeness is really, I think, a helpful thing to plant as like, if you don't experience wholeness, or if you don't always experience wholeness, to know that it's there. Physically, what happens when we have wholeness in our system, we have more vitality, we have deeper relaxation, we have more sensation, more conscious sensation in our body. So that's everything from like flavor of food, brightness of the experience of what we see in the world, more beauty. We spoke a little bit about shame. We will go into, in this series or another one, because I'm so passionate about talking about the power of shame, and really repatterning shame in a beautiful way. Reclaiming shame is like I call it an initiatory molecule that is very transformative when we work with it intentionally and in a titrated way. But if you are able to do that, when you are able to do that, ultimately what ends up happening is you increase your self-trust. Your self-trust starts to blossom so that you can experience that your capacity to feel is actually something magnificent and really, really beautiful, when it's not blocked by that social regulatory shame that, for many of us, myself included, is the case. It leads to more, and you alluded to this in the beginning, but it bears repeating, mental clarity, creative inspiration, greater amounts of imagination, the natural flow of this upper part of the channel is it opens these upper chakras. It opens our expansive nature of understanding and seeing the world in this realm of clarity in our mind. Sometimes we don't realize how obstructed that is by cultural conditioning, or just like the channel not being able to move freely and easily for a multitude of reasons, all of which, it's just as simple as like, just clear the line. um Spirituality, right? This is like, we're not proposing that you do it for this reason. It's kind of can be inviting to be like, oh, it's like, spiritual initiations, and yeah, that's a juicy topic that we'll probably cover as well. But ultimately, it leads to this like intimacy with in yourself, leads to a reverence and a presence for life. And so rather than it being about the spiritual chasing of reverence and presence, it's, as you spoke about, intimacy with self creates reverence and presence in your experience. And then, clearer communication shows up relationally. There's less projection. There's more capacity for attunement. Like, all of a sudden, intimacy becomes a space that's not so pokey and scary, but actually something that's like just really sweet and beautiful to enjoy together. So, yeah, such a
Hmm.
treasure to be able to work in this way with people and to see them blossoming within this. I want to talk about the whack-a-mole model that is a big part of like the coaching world, and a lot of even the health and well-being world. But before I do, is there anything that you wanted to share, just an integration of that last little section we covered?
That was really beautiful. And I could really feel thank you for that feel of the awe and the beauty. I think the point about in this way, we're coming back into deeper feeling, and therefore to learn that the riverbanks are there to allow for there to be flow, neither to dam up the flow nor for it to just be chaotically flooding, but that when there's a nice, strong riverbank, then you get this nice, beautiful, clean flow in life. And we will feel more. We'll feel more pleasure. We'll feel more intense sensation. We'll feel emotions. People will start to recognize there's not positive and negative emotions. That's another big part of the cultural conditioning that we need to all overcome. Anger is not bad, sadness isn't bad, happiness isn't good, and the other ones are bad, but the happiness will be way happier, and the contentment will be deeper. The sadness, the tears will be cleaner, but they'll go deeper. The anger will be fiery and it'll be a cleaner burning fire. That's so it's a package deal. It's the all of the above option. It's not, oh, I'd like more of this one, but less of that one, please. And if our feeling comes back online, it's going to be as a sensory as these deep feeling human animals and souled beings. Like, we can feel an immense amount. And something starts to happen where even when it's more tender or more intense, it moves through more cleanly. And there's something in it over the long haul. Every moment we can all have moments of, "Ugh, why did I sign up for this?" And I have them, um, but other parts on the larger arc, I would say, is a feeling of I can't go back to doing it the old way. There's a feeling of a rightness or a grain of life that's just like this is the trajectory.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
And that to me is, I think, your point about it can't be forced. It's empowerment and it's responsibility, and we cooperate, but there is this kind of like current, and trying to flow with the current. At some point, you can try swimming against it, you can try going against it, but look at the consequences in our world. It's not fun. It's not pleasant that way.
yeah. You use the word ensoulment, and
Hmm.
yeah, for Chris and my background, you should probably look us up. This is a lot of our work in the past has been helping people with this journey of ensoulment. And I really I appreciate just bringing that languaging up in this place of like, as you come deeper into your fully conscious, lucid, luminous experience, that is ensoulment, and it is an ensoulment that recognizes that all emotions are welcome and all of this human experience is welcome, and that is most often what we are seeking in our journey. And so when people come and they're like, well, what's my purpose? And sort of another way of actually saying that is they're trying to access the consciousness of their vital force energy within their body. And they're looking for somebody to tell them what that is because we've been conditioned to get somebody to tell us how to find that. So this is, it's beyond that model. It's simply that that starts to emerge, and I can't tell you what it is. Only you can tell me what that is, and that's mostly what I'm interested in learning from people is like the magnificence of you tell me what that feels like. You tell me what that expression is, and even to go a layer deeper and recognize that that expression today is going to be even more nuanced tomorrow and even more nuanced and detailed the next day. And that sometimes in our relational patterning and just the way that the unconscious experience works is there can be this assumption that the Chris that is in front of me today is the same Chris that was in front of me yesterday. And through my projections, I don't need to ask him any questions. I don't need to deepen in our intimate experience because I already know, I already have that landscape. But you will find, as I have and many people report, the more you do this work, the more you recognize that a person is emerging in their freshness. And that leads to a new intimacy with that person every day becomes like another way of like, wow, like there's so many facets to a being as they start to come alive. And when we're in our dullness or in our deadness experience, because of protection, because we needed to, because it wasn't safe to be that way, when it starts to become safe, there's so many layers to a person's being. It's really, really magnificent. So I'm speaking about all the great parts, but I just also want to speak about some of the places where it can be really difficult for, mostly I work with women, and in a woman's journey, there can be this experience of libido changing. So this is not about like chasing libido or chasing the symptoms of connection or chasing desires or chasing confidence. That when you start to work with your vital force or your vital life force energy, uh, the root of our relationship to aliveness itself starts to come alive. And then that becomes something that we're integrating. And it's something that means that we have less efforting and just more alignment. It's important to understand that this isn't like, this is more of a restoration. You don't need to do anything. You don't need to go to the gym. You don't need to do breath work. You don't need to do, there's not a doing. It's a restoration. And so there's a real beautiful simplicity to that. um, Cultivating deep self-enjoyment is like part of the practice. So if I was going to say like there's anything that's within this practice, it's like self-enjoyment, not as narcissism, but self-trust. What I'm experiencing in my trust of what's arising in myself becomes something that's like my celebration of life. And in the early parts of this work, I remember running into that narcissism sort of element for myself of like, why is it so important what I'm feeling? Why is it so important what is alive in myself? And there was a resistance to claiming that truth. There was a resistance to it being meaningful in some way. And yeah, a big part of that healing journey has been just to come home to my body and ultimately be in a practice of reducing dependency on it being a certain way, as well as urgency for it to be different than it was. So we've underscored that a number of times, but it is a really, like, I can't say it enough, catching when there is that urgency to be different than your experience is. That when you start to enjoy yourself, intimacy becomes an offering, not a need. That's actually really crucial. Intimacy becomes an offering, not something that is extractive. We kind of used that word earlier. Sometimes intimacy can have this extractive experience. Um, that's especially maybe pertinent for me to underscore of like, as we go more into talking about submission and sovereign submission in future videos, that place of offering and the personal responsibility around the offering of intimacy. And this is this beautiful foundation for a safe, transparent connection. Transparency is, I would say, one of the most magnificent tools that I've come to understand is a beautiful way of living in the world. And if it wasn't safe to be open and honest in the past, then transparency might feel, it might bring up some parts. It might bring up some parts of, but what if it's used against me? Or what if I'm manipulated with it? Or, that element of bringing that consciousness to that can be helpful. Just track that for yourself right now. Is there a feeling of, if I'm transparent and open, that that is going to make me in some way more vulnerable, um, more open to attack? Um, yeah, those are all parts of these elements. I want to say that because when you get to a place where you can have transparent connection, there's a magnetism and an allurement that starts to arrive. And I think a lot of people actually are chasing in a what I like to call like a sideways model, that like magnetism or allurement, where it's been, I don't know how to get to it in a transparent and conscious open channel way. So I'm gonna put some lipstick on it, or I'm gonna, minimize the element of the truth that's showing up for me, but we can all feel that. And so when that energy comes out sideways as opposed to in this like central channel way, actually what becomes really magnificent is like the allurement of a person that's fully authentic in themselves as well as an open channel. Like the allurement and magnetism of that is something that I believe the world is chasing without knowing that they're chasing and without knowing that it's in them right now. you know, there's a reason
Yeah,
you're chasing it. You're looking for it, right?
and if when we create external templates, this is what a sexy person looks like. This is what whatever the good looking person is, or this is who you're supposed to be, or this is how you get the person to want to be with you, then that template is not that person's organic blueprint of their own expression of the light of the universe. Like they're their own unique being that's here. And it's not going to be some ridiculous 5-step formula. Do this, don't say that, and do this, and blah, blah, blah. And then they just become these kind of robotic, beings because they're just disconnected. Instead, when somebody's really in their yum, like when they're really in their delicious, fiery energy, the people can feel it. You'll feel like, whoa, they got something going on. That sounds, what are they up to? And again, that doesn't mean when people are, what's interesting in is they become more in their own unique energy. It attracts some and it actually repels others. And that's actually kind of part of it. Instead of this kind of, I'm supposed to be for everybody, I'm supposed to like contort myself like, but this person doesn't like me, but that person might not like me. Oh my goodness, what does that mean about me? And instead you just start going like, who actually is interested in the vibe I'm putting out? And where's their resonance? And then that's where you start to get really beautiful friendships or collaborations or kind of chosen families, lovers. Like that's actually now we actually can start to develop trust because it's like I'm putting out a beacon and somebody else goes, "Oh, tell me more about that. That's interesting." Or, versus this like, "Oh, but will everybody like me? Will they not like?" Oh, it's just such a. And I think your point about the whack-a-mole earlier in all of this again is to say when we're starting with the dynamic wholeness and the inherent agency in a being, when we're tapped into source and we're feeling the flow of life, then yes, healing things and old patterns are going to emerge to exfoliate or to get alchemized for sure. Because there's so much cultural movement, as we've been saying, against just being our unique kind of trajectory in life. But we're not starting with the symptoms. The symptoms are now only make if we start with what is like the deep source connection, and then the other stuff shows up as stuff that's out of resonance to that, then it makes sense contextually. Oh, okay, some grief came up because this hasn't been the way and it wasn't safe to be this way. Completely makes sense. Here's how to work with that. Or there's a lot of resentment about past experience that didn't line up to this. Okay, that totally makes sense too. Here's how you work with that. Otherwise, we're starting with symptoms, and that's the whack-a-mole game. That's like, but I feel this and I don't want to feel it, but this is happening and I blame this person and what's wrong with me and what's wrong with them and la la la. Or won't someone come and just sweep me off my feet and my Prince Charming will come and make me everything okay and one day I'll rescue the princess and slay the dragon and she'll love me and then I'll be a hero and a knight in shining armor. All this romantic mythology. I'll meet the one. I'll call them in. Then we'll kiss, under the in the perfect sunset, and it'll fade to black, and the credits will roll, and we'll live happily ever after, and we'll never have to grow, and we'll never have to change again, and we'll never have to do anything. And it just is, there's like billions of dollars, maybe more than that, trillions potentially invested in that form of psychological conditioning. And so to be able to step out of it, the messaging, if you're noticing that the messaging is mixed everywhere else in the world, that's that's a feature, not a bug, I would say. Like it is meant to keep people distracted and confused and bewildered and feeling powerless. And so forever then you can be selling this thing and that thing and another thing because the whack-a-mole game never ends. You're just smacking the moles back down instead of wondering what is it about this garden? What is it about this soil concept that we keep getting caught in this game? So this is again why starting with here's somebody's vital life force energy, and that's like the truth of their being. That's their luminosity, as you've been saying. And then the other stuff is stuff that's got to move through and finish in so that there's more space for that to flow more deeply. Then it makes sense.
Yeah.
Then there's a context and a path and a rightness about it.
Yeah, and it really, I love that you name that part of what I like to call like your energetic legibility. When you're singing in a clear signal, you won't be for everybody, and that's a beautiful thing. And when you repulse a being that is not the right energetic integrity for you, you don't take it personally, right? If they're like, I don't like her boldness, or I don't like her how self-claimed energy, or I don't like how freely she speaks, or conversely for masculine, where it's like, whatever big charge of energy is there, if you feel a repulsion, you can feel that as clarity. You can feel that as a deep knowing, where you're not trying to perform or convince them that it needs to be different than it is. As well as when you attract what you attract, there's also a clarity there too. So there immediately is more trust in the magnetism that shows up. You're not needing to question what you're magnetizing to yourself so much, because your clear channel is magnetizing people that are also vibing the same way that you're vibing. And so that leads to this place where I know you and I've spoken about it. It really hit me as something that was like tender in my journey. And that is the birthright part, to feel alive as a birthright, that pleasure is not indulgence, it's information. And it connects us to um, yeah, our divinity, this divine personal experience that is our birthright, where intimacy is with existence, it's with all things. It's not just with ourself and another body potentially, but it's intimacy with all things. And that reframes this turn on in a really beautiful way as something that is both spiritual as well as ethical, as well as deeply human. This is a deeply human experience, to be fully lit up in your incarnation. Um, I want to wrap this up because I want to make sure that we can kind of keep it just to the information that's here. We've got a series of several more coming as well. Before I do, let's talk a little bit about intimacy as a divine pleasure or a divine birthright, and then just why this material matters so much for intimacy as our kind of closing elements. And yeah, please, that part of the birthright to me really hit home when we first spoke about this years back now.
Yeah, birthright is well, I'm glad it did. That's really sweet to hear. Um, for me too, when it was taught to me. Um, so I'm just happy to pass it along. Um, what's nice, I think, about the metaphor of birthright is that it combines this theme we've been speaking to, which is what part of this is choiceless, or here I would say the word grace. A birthright is not something someone earns or unearns. It's something that's given. In this case, I would say it's given by the sacredness of existing. The choice is whether we choose to accept it or not and feel the empowerment of that accepting and also become responsible. Not in a heavy, burdensome way, because it's actually playful responsibility. It actually just becomes more creativity than like responsibility. It's more like, well, this is actually really fun. It also has tender moments, as we've said, but overall, there's just a rightness feeling. And so the question is, do we want to accept that we're actually here to live in joy and love and ecstasy together? It'll be tender. It's tender. But to me, it's a way of saying that the nature of consciousness is actually to be really blissful when it's held in the body. That's just what it is. And you can call that a birthright, you can call that a naturalness, whatever term you like, but that is what it is in a unique way in each being. And so the question is just like, do you want to take up the invitation? Do you want to get on the adventure? Do you want to try it out? And then the question is, and this is, what we've mentioned here, and then in more to come, is like, here are the practices that are helpful. They're not ultimately it, but they are supportive to help create best conditions. But there's still a magic and a mystery to the thing that's, as you said, primal or wild or ultimately deeply mysterious. It's a current. And so you can learn to try to swim and navigate with the current. That is important. That's part of empowerment, responsibility, and good navigation and discernment. And we're not in control of the current. So you can choose to fight against it or, white knuckle, or you can choose to have fun on the ride. It's really what it comes down to.
Yeah, totally. Are you fighting the ocean or are you surfing it? Yeah, 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 for sure. Thank you. Yeah. So why this matters for intimacy is just, something that I feel like if it isn't abundantly obvious, I'm gonna really, hammer it home here. Why would you want to do this work? Why would you want to understand this? Um, the word that came to mind as you were talking about the birthright is sublime. Chris and I have been talking a lot about this process of like, where does the current go when there's safety, when there's sovereignty? It goes to this experience of sublime, this like, life experience that is otherworldly in a way and yet deeply embodied. And so why would you want to have that? Why wouldn't you would actually be the question. But why this matters in intimacy, and whether this is in a personal intimacy or a couple's relationship, but a lot of the time it happens where we get to co-create these things together. When a person owns their turn on, their relationship becomes safer. Yeah. There's less projections, there's less coercion, there's more transparency. There's this element of trust that emerges when there's a clear yes and a clear no and clear pacing. Then energetically, there's an easefulness that shows up because we can trust the other person to shepherd themselves. And then we can really just be in this place where we can be in our own clear relationship to our yeses and nos. And that is a space where safety is apparent. It's energetically apparent. It's consciously apparent. It's physically apparent in the way that body expresses. And then this next thing that is really just as beautiful, like part of the sublime, I would say, is that intimacy becomes this shared field of choice and not pressure. And in a world where, for myself anyway, I've gone through a lot of healing around that pressure and expectation around intimacy as something that was like needed in the relationship, even though I was numb, even though I was like in a space where I was completely shut down. So for most people, this is a journey where it helps to have coaching to get to that place. It helps to have somebody that is midwifing, you're doing great. This is totally normal. Everything that's showing up is actually a part of success within this. Something that Chris and I offer is like containment support around, how to work in a container, whether it's just you individually or you in a dynamic partnership with other people, one or multiple, uh, offering languages that help people communicate what's true for them. And so there's lots of processes that we teach and help facilitate for people I don't like to call it nervous system regulation. I would say it's nervous system awareness. It's knowing where I am in my continuum of my nervous system and being self-responsible for that. But that ultimately, all of that, it creates this space where there's clarity, safety, and integrity within intimacy. And it's not more about intensity, it's more about truth. And that is really such a magnificent space that I feel like a lot of us are deeply longing for. So, in closing, check out the links below. Anything that you'd like to share as we wrap this up, Chris?
Only this to underscore this point of if we're modeling ourself based consciously or unconsciously off of some external template that isn't true to who we are, that isn't true to our unique expression of this universal force of life, then we're inherently going to live in anxiety in our relationships because we can never know really, does the person actually love and care about me? And then there's always a deep fear, anxiety. This path creates a different space of certainty, and that'll come with both different kinds of connections that may have come out of nowhere, seemingly out of nowhere, that will vibe together, and others that may end up running their course because they haven't been based on this and isn't mutually desired to be in this kind of zone together. But at least it'll be known that when there's yeses, they're more trustable, as you were saying. Yeah.
that Let that one move through my body as a beautiful exhale. Thanks for naming that. Thanks for watching and tuning in to the turn on. I like that name. So we got more to come. I hope you find the next one. And thanks for joining. Thanks so much, Chris. It was a really beautiful
Thank
conversation.
you. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Sarah.